Hi everyone. So for my book talk, I read the 6 academic writing assignments by Jim Burke, and Kirsty already did an awesome job highlighting what each of these 6 types of writing assignments are, and then we spent a decent amount of time also talking about how we implement them in our classrooms and what we would like to maybe implement more of. So I took a bit of a different approach. As Jim Burke highlights these different types of writing assignments, I noticed 3 big ideas sprinkled throughout each one, and they are friction points, engagement, and then the idea of marrying reading and writing when constructing writing assignments. So I just want to touch on each of those and what he has to say about them. So the first point is friction points. I really like this quote that he included. It says, "Friction refers to anything that prevents a user from accomplishing a goal. Friction weighs down interactions, making even the most well-designed interface a nightmare to use. So your goal is to create interactions which unravel with a natural sense of order and logic." And I definitely have found throughout my own writing instruction that there have been times when I have created an assignment that was not user-friendly, and it was a detriment to the outcome. So these are questions that Jim Burke's uses as he's creating his own writing assignments, and I think that they're really important things for us to consider. So the quote kind of prefacing these questions is, "Some friction points undermine students' performance by distracting them." So the first one is, how much support should I give, and are my supports clarifying or confusing? Jim Burke discusses the idea of overwhelming students with resources and how that can actually stifle their progression in a writing assignment as opposed to helping them refine their writing. The next question is, am I using academic language that deters students from fully grasping the prompt? So this was specifically highlighted in the on-demand writing prompt section, but I think this can really be applied in all of our writing assignments, whether it's rubrics or oral instruction. Are we breaking down our assignments using student-friendly vocabulary? He used examples that we might tend to use that will just confuse students: a synthesis, viewpoint, common thematic statement. They're probably less advanced vocabulary for the younger grades, but nevertheless, things that will get in their way. He also talked about how detrimental these types of words can be to English language learners. So if we have any of those students in our classroom, really being mindful of the language that we're using. And then the last one I thought was really interesting. He said, "Do I utilize too many apps, creating unnecessary friction points in the writing process?" So when he referred to apps, he talked about things like Noodle Tools, Google Sites, Google Docs, and he mentions how he's a minimalist in regards to apps when students are assigned a writing project. So not spending so much time navigating new apps and more time honing in on the actual writing itself. And so I thought this was just a nice all-encompassing quote here. The important lesson here is that we are never just designing a prompt or writing assignment. Rather, we are designing an experience, a document, an assessment, a tool that students must be able to use without struggling to make sense of it or taking too long to read. And I thought the idea of designing an experience is a good transition into the next point, and that's engagement. So, Burke says, work to fully understand the experience of the user for whom you are designing. Do this through observation, interaction, and immersing yourself in their experiences. So these are 4 ways that I noticed Burke kind of really doing the best that he can to foster student engagement throughout the course of his assignments. So one is gathering information about students' attitude toward writing. This is something that I personally have never done, and Jim Burke talks about how at the beginning of all of his writing courses, he surveys the students to get an idea of their background, what has their writing instruction looked like in the past, and their general attitude toward writing. So I thought that was a really great way to connect with students and craft our assignments based on where they're coming from as former writers. The next one is creating relevant introspective prompts as a means of connecting books to our own students' lives. So Burke discusses, for example, that his first reading unit for his seniors is Into the Wild. And before they begin reading, he has all of the seniors answer the prompt, what does it feel like to be your age? And I just thought that was a really powerful starting point before diving into the novel of this person who is finding himself at an odd age or transitional age, and asking that questions to seniors, I think, is really going to create a connection to a text. And so I think we as teachers can work towards crafting prompts and writing assignments that get our students engaged in whatever the reading we're doing or the assignment. The next one is allowing students to examine a text from different lenses. So for example, economic, historic, psychological, philosophical, sociological, gender, culture, racial, etc. I think that highlighting themes across texts is a really important aspect, and a lot of times I know the texts that I have taught and teach, there's many different types of themes that we can draw from them, and allowing students to choose sort of what lens they're viewing a novel or a book from can certainly increase engagement. And then the last one is teaching the practical, real-world stuff through alternative assignments. And one thing that Jim Burke mentions is that students are constantly asking the when will I use this in real life question. And he noted a particular student who really had minimal engagement in many of the writing assignments, but when it came to actual real world assignments, so an expose to admin was an example he used, thank you letters to guest speakers in an English class, a business proposal plan for a photography business. These sorts of assignments really engaged the student, and he saw much higher quality in his writing because it was relevant and it was real and it was applicable. So I thought those were some interesting things to note throughout engagement. The last topic here is marrying reading, writing, and the world. So I really love this quote from the book. It says, students must write on an assignment that requires them to use what they've read. Only in that way will they start learning to read with accuracy and comprehension. Such assignments, if well designed, should also bring the world into the writing classroom. So, one thing I really appreciated in this book was this list of teacher verbs, essentially, and kind of using them to plant seeds in our writing instruction of how can we create writing assignments that are provoked by what our students are reading. And I know a lot of us already do that, but one thing that I thought was really cool that Jim Burke noted was that these opportunities right here that I have listed increase the amount of writing that our students are doing without necessarily increasing our paper load or our grading load. And I think that's huge. I know for me, I constantly want to assign more writing, but I just don't have the time to grade it. So I thought these were really cool opportunities listed here. A 1 minute or 5 minute essay in the place of an exit ticket. I thought that was really cool. And then just annotating and responding to texts in real time as they're reading it. And there's several other ideas there as well that I thought were stickouts. The last thing that I want to discuss here that it was just essentially talked about throughout the entire book is this expert paper that Jim Burke assigns his classroom. And this, to me, is the ultimate example of marrying reading, writing, and the world. And so right here, I love this kind of seed to plant in students as they get started on it. Essentially, the expert project is a year-long research paper, but this is the explanation he gives them right off the bat. Our challenge throughout the early years of our life is to find a question or a problem that so fascinates us that we want to spend the rest of our life trying to answer or solve it, or at least play some part in that process. As we learn more about this subject, investigating it over time from different perspectives, we begin to develop some expertise. The definition and etymology of the word expert is worth mentioning. and then he goes on to describe what an expert is. And I'm sitting here reading it thinking, well, I'm inspired now to become an expert. So the idea of picking some real world either issue or topic, and just immersing yourself in the reading, immersing yourself in the exploration, and really just creating students who are not only able to synthesize information that they read, to organize that information into a sound piece of writing, but also to just become more knowledgeable, well-rounded citizens. And so I just really love his expert paper here. And these are some attributes that the expert paper hits that we really want our students to, we want to foster in our students. So curiosity, openness, engagement, creativity, persistence, I think is a big one, responsibility, flexibility, metacognition. So as we're kind of transitioning into our questions here, I will read from the bottom up. So in what ways do you marry reading, writing, and the world in your classroom? And then, do you have any expert paper type assignments? And if so, what do they look like? So do you have any research-based assignments where students take information that they have explored and then produce some sort of product from that information? What factors do you take into consideration when creating assignments that engage your learners? And then how have you adapted your curriculum to maintain student engagement? And then the last, also first, what friction points have you observed in your classroom? And what are ways you have found to minimize friction points? So you can jump on into these questions, and I look forward to reading your responses. Thanks, guys.